In a stunning move that sent shockwaves across the global economy, Boeing, the very symbol of American industrial power, announced it would be closing all its factories in the United States. This was not just another corporate decision. This was a seismic shift that redefined the future of American manufacturing. The question on everyone's mind: how did we get here? What does it mean when one of America's most iconic companies abandons its roots? This unprecedented move came just months after Donald Trump took office and introduced tariffs that shook the international trade system. The tariffs, designed to shield American industries from foreign competition, ended up triggering the opposite effect. Businesses like Boeing were suddenly caught in a web of rising costs and escalating trade tensions. Boeing's CEO at the time, Kelly Ortberg, knew something had to change. Under the new tariff regime, prices for raw materials like steel and aluminum skyrocketed. Key components from overseas became more expensive, and with Boeing's intricate global supply chain, these added costs were untenable. The company, known for its cutting-edge aerospace technology and its enormous manufacturing footprint in the U.S., found itself at a crossroads. In the face of these obstacles, Boeing made the drastic decision to shift its operations overseas. The strategic pivot wasn't just about cost savings. It was a response to an increasingly hostile trade environment that made manufacturing in the U.S. unsustainable. What Boeing faced was a stark reality. To stay competitive on the global stage, it had no choice but to leave the country that had nurtured it for over a century. And just like that, thousands of American workers, engineers, and families were left to pick up the pieces. As Boeing packed its bags and left, the reverberations were felt far and wide. What seemed like a corporate relocation quickly became a symbol of something far more profound: the unraveling of America's industrial might. What happened when Boeing left wasn't just the closing of factories. It was the dismantling of a community, a culture, and a nation's confidence in its industrial future. Let's talk numbers. Boeing's decision didn't just hit the company, it devastated local economies. Communities in Washington, South Carolina, Missouri, and California, once thriving with Boeing workers, now faced bleak futures. Thousands of jobs vanished overnight. Small businesses that had relied on Boeing employees for their livelihoods crumbled. The tax base in these cities plummeted, and the ripple effects began to unravel across every sector. Entire neighborhoods saw their real estate values nosedive, and local governments scrambled to adjust. But the consequences weren't just economic. Boeing wasn't just a company that built airplanes. It was a critical player in America's defense strategy. The U.S. military depended on Boeing for advanced aircraft, satellites, and weapon systems. With production moving overseas, concerns mounted. Could Boeing's defense contracts be compromised? Would these cutting-edge technologies remain secure if they were produced in foreign countries? The U.S. now faced a new kind of vulnerability, a security risk created by the very policies meant to protect the nation's industries. Boeing's departure quickly became a case study in the failure of protectionist policies. Donald Trump's tariffs, designed to boost U.S. industries, ended up pushing Boeing out of the country. Critics of the tariffs seized on Boeing's move as a clear sign that protectionism doesn't work. It's one thing to try to protect American jobs. It's another to drive away the very companies that are integral to the nation's economy and security. When Boeing made the leap, it wasn't just the company that changed, it was the entire landscape of American industry. The once unstoppable force of U.S. manufacturing now found itself on shaky ground, with Boeing's move revealing harsh truths about the future of global competition, corporate loyalty, and economic security. But this wasn't just a corporate relocation. It was a moment in history that would alter the very fabric of how we view American power, leadership, and identity on the world stage. With Boeing's sudden exit, the global aerospace landscape was forever altered. The company that had been the dominant force in aircraft manufacturing for decades no longer stood unchallenged. Its departure created a vacuum that was quickly filled by its competitors, most notably Airbus. Airbus, long Boeing's European rival, stood ready to capitalize on the upheaval. But it wasn't just Airbus that saw an opportunity. China, Russia, and other emerging industrial powers looked to seize this moment. Countries that once heavily relied on Boeing began diversifying their suppliers, seeking stability in other manufacturers that could offer more predictable and perhaps less politically entangled alternatives. Countries eager to attract Boeing's relocated manufacturing operations began offering lucrative tax incentives, relaxed regulations, and promises of labor stability. These deals weren't just about creating jobs. They were about positioning themselves as the new industrial hubs of the future. The loss of Boeing's U.S. facilities, once considered untouchable symbols of American manufacturing, might now represented a stunning example of global competition at work. The U.S., a nation that had once been the undisputed industrial powerhouse of the world, was now scrambling to keep up. While Boeing sought cheaper labor markets abroad, the American government was left trying to pick up the pieces, with other nations ready to fill the gaps left by its departure. Boeing was not just a manufacturer, it was a cornerstone of aerospace innovation. For decades, Boeing's research and development teams pushed the boundaries of technology, working with universities, government agencies, and private research labs to bring new technologies to life. From pioneering advancements in jet engine design to contributing to NASA's space missions, Boeing had been at the forefront of aerospace R&D. But with the company's shift overseas, the American aerospace industry faced a significant setback. Universities that had long relied on Boeing for research funding and collaboration found themselves in crisis. Grants and internships evaporated, leaving a void in the next generation of aerospace engineers and scientists. Institutions that had tailored their programs to supply Boeing with top-tier talent now saw a sharp decline in student interest. Why pursue a career in aerospace when the very industry that once offered stable, high-paying jobs was now retreating from U.S. soil? The loss of Boeing's R&D operations in the U.S. was also a blow to the nation's technological edge. The U.S. had long prided itself on being the global leader in aerospace technology, but Boeing's departure threatened to erase decades of progress. The next big leaps in hypersonic travel, sustainable aviation fuel, and autonomous flight systems were now at risk of being developed elsewhere. Other countries, particularly in Europe and Asia, were eager to pick up where Boeing left off. As the U.S. turned inward, countries like China and Russia poured money into their own aerospace sectors, hoping to close the technological gap. The race to dominate the skies and the stars was no longer confined to just the U.S. and Europe. It had become a global competition, and Boeing's exit marked the start of America's struggle to maintain its place at the top. Perhaps the most lasting and far-reaching impact of Boeing's decision to relocate was the cultural shift that accompanied it. For generations, Boeing had been more than just a company. It was an emblem of American ingenuity, a symbol of the nation's industrial might and technological prowess. Its factories were sacred places where the American dream was realized, where hardworking men and women built the very machines that helped the U.S. dominate the skies. But as Boeing packed up its operations and moved abroad, the nation was forced to confront some uncomfortable truths. What does it mean when a company like Boeing, which had been integral to the fabric of American industry, no longer believes that it can operate in the U.S.? Boeing's departure raised broader questions about the sustainability of America's industrial base in an increasingly globalized world. It forced Americans to grapple with the reality that the very industries that had once fueled the nation's rise to power were now leaving, and with them, the jobs, the skills, and the communities that had relied on them. For many, the loss of Boeing was a blow to American exceptionalism. The belief that the U.S. was the best, the brightest, the most innovative, was now being tested. Could America continue to lead the world in technology and innovation when its flagship companies were abandoning its shores? Was the American dream still achievable for the generations that followed, or had it become a relic of the past? The political consequences of Boeing's move were far-reaching and complex. On one hand, the Trump administration's protectionist policies, designed to bring jobs back to the U.S., were seen as a failure in this context. The very tariffs meant to protect American workers had driven one of the country's most significant employers out of the country, leaving thousands unemployed in their wake. Politicians who had championed these tariffs now found themselves on the defensive, forced to explain how their policies had ended up harming the very people they sought to protect. At the same time, Boeing's exit sparked a renewed debate about the role of corporations in society. Should companies like Boeing be loyal to the nation that helped them grow, or should they be free to pursue the most profitable options, regardless of the human and economic cost?